Good evening, folks. Mrs. P here. Welcome back from a long winter break. Well, maybe too long or not long enough. I don't know, however you look at it with kids and parents and teachers. But I welcome you back. We are already moving full force into it. Your students this week are working with percentages. Now, these percentages are being compared to the way we looked at ratios and rates. And from there, remember, we looked at fractions to get to ratios and rates. So we're going from fractions to ratios, ratios to percentages. And once we get done with percentages, we're going to go on to measurements. It's looking at that comparison of what you have, what you want, what you see. And so today, your students are bringing home a good size homework assignment, 14 problems, probably the most I've given them all year. But it's about something we've already done in class because I'm pretty good at teaching. Spiraling. And we've done decimals, we've done fractions. And when we did those, I went ahead and introduced percents. So we've been doing modeling and converting of fractions, decimals, and percents all year. So this is really a review that we want to see that they remember so that we can move on to something a little bit harder with percents as the week goes on. So today they're coming home with modeling and converting. Modeling and converting percents. So we went through this all today in class. It's just a simple overview of it. If a student sees a percent and they want to model it, I have here an example, 13%. We know percents are based on 100. If I have 100% of something, I've got it all. I have the whole. And that's, of course, what we all want, but sometimes you just don't get that. In this case, I just have 13%. So for me to model 13%, I simply fill in 13 out of the 100, which would look like this. 13 out of 100. It's the same thing as 13%. Then I fill in 13. This is a 10 by 10 number-based block. That makes 100 squares. Each one with 10, so there's 10, and there's 3. That shows 13%, 13 out of 100. So we're doing that today. We're going to be looking at modeling those, and in fact, we pretty much did all of those in class today. They're then going to come home and take these things and turn them into fractions and decimals, or vice versa. Maybe they have a decimal and they need to turn it into a fraction and percent. I tell them these three number families are just that. They're in the same family. A fraction can become a percent can become a decimal, and so forth. Back and forth, you can interchange them. So they're coming home tonight with an example like 75%. Easy to model. I make a square. I fill in 3 of it. That's 75%. Now the students will look at you and say, that's 3/4. They know the equivalence of 75% is 3/4. How did we do that? Well, we took a percent. We're going to turn it into a fraction. We know that 75% is 75% out of 100%. We're trying to get a whole. So 75 out of 100, because that's out of 100%, 75 pieces out of 100, 75 cents out of $1. We then take that and we want to turn it into a decimal. Well, if we want to do that, first, kids will see the equivalency. They know that 75 hundredths is equal to 3/4, and they know that because they divide by 25. 25 into 75 is 3, 25 into 100 is 4. That is how they say, oh, that's 75%, Mrs. P. And they can model it any way. They could use a circle, equivalent parts. They could do this. I used this one with them today. And I said, what does that represent? And they said, oh, 3/4, 75%. Or some kids would notice, maybe it's just 1/4, Mrs. P, 1/4 sad. Maybe it's 25%. That's that modeling and being able to interchange percents to fractions and fractions now to decimals. So what I tell kids is go ahead and write it as a fraction. There it is. 75 hundredths divided by 25. There's your fraction. Now if they look at that though, they're going to go, I don't know how I'm going to really change that to a decimal. So I tell them, watch, you don't have to come to the fraction to change it into a decimal. You could have changed it into a decimal right here from the percent. And they know rules for that. If this is 75 hundredths, when I look at percents to decimals, I'm thinking of the place value and where I want to move. Well, if I have 75% and I want to turn it into a decimal, where is the 100%, where's the hundredths in decimals? And the decimal means that there are 2 spots behind it to get into the hundredths position. And so they just know to move the decimal 2 spots to the left, decimal always at the back of the number, and go to the left to turn it into 75 hundredths. Now that looks like this. Does it say the same thing? 75%, you said, was 75 hundredths. Isn't 75 hundredths 75 hundredths as a decimal? That's how I read that. They know these rules. They know that fractions require division or base 10 numbers. Division or base 10 numbers. Decimals require place value. I need to get to the hundredths position. Percents require moving the decimal. If it's a percent and I want to go to a decimal, I go to the left. If it's a decimal and I want to turn it into a percent, I'm going to move the decimal to the right. And I only do that 2 times, never any more than that. So if I have a decimal and it is 301 and I want to turn that into a percent, I'm going to move the decimal to turn it into a percent. Decimal goes to the right once, twice, only, no more. My decimal now lands here, and that is equal to 30.1%. And that should seem to make sense to students, because if you have 301 thousandths, do you have 300 as in 3 holes, or do you have parts of those holes? And it'll only give you back 30%, not 300%. And that's what we talked about today, really just a review, parents. I told the students to watch this video. You can go over it with them. If they have any questions, of course they know. Come back and ask Mrs. P. Talk to her tomorrow in class. And then also, don't worry and fret if you get things wrong. Come on back. Show us what you did. And then if you do have struggles or have questions, we're going to talk about them and then make it better for you as we move on during this week. Again, I thank you for watching the video. I thank you for having wonderful kids. We've had a great 2 days since we've been back already from winter break. And I can't wait to see where the year takes us as we go all the way to May. Thank you all very much. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.